So thank you very much for joining us on this Saturday morning. This session is about how to write a research proposal. And in particular, it's geared towards those of you that are interested in applying to the PhD program at LUMS. We offer PhD programs from the School of Engineering and the Hard Sciences, and we offer a single PhD program out of the business school. So Suleiman Daoud School of Business offers a PhD in management with 3 tracks. One is organizational behavior and strategy, the other is operations management, and the third is finance. Yeah. So I'm from the School of Business. My name is Ghazal Zulfikar. I teach public policy and business at the school, at SDSB, as we like to call our business school here at LUMS. If you are interested, if you will be applying to other universities, not just LUMS, this workshop is still for you because we follow international standards in terms of our research. LUMS is a rigorous research institution. We have faculty that produce top quality research recognized by different global and international indicators, such as top ranking journals, global conferences in our domains, and of course, the more quantitative measures such as the Google Index, the H Index, and other rankings in which our program and our faculty have taken the lead in, historically and at present. So what that means for you, if you're interested in applying to the PhD program, is that you should know that it's a place where research takes not central. So teaching is very important with us, but research is as important as teaching. And in the PhD program, it's really all about research, right? So we have a program where our top faculty train our students in rigorous research methods, in theory, in conceptualizing their particular, as in the students' particular research problems, and then expecting very high quality in terms of the research product, which is the PhD thesis. So when you're applying, the most important thing that we're looking for is your potential to produce the kind of research quality that we are looking for, right? So we're not looking for people who are already producing amazing amounts of high quality research. No, you wouldn't need a PhD if you're already doing that. But we are looking for that potential. And how do we apply to that potential? How do we figure out whether you have that potential? Well, the way to do it is to study your research proposal. So I'll give you an short inside peek into what it looks like when your application comes to us. When your application comes to us, it comes along with dozens of others. So one of the first measures that we use to shortlist applicants is to look at your GRE GMAT scores, your transcripts, and other information that would fit inside an Excel spreadsheet, right? So that we can quickly shortlist applicants. But once we've done that initial shortlisting, we read your research proposals. And if your research proposals show potential, then we invite you for an interview. And then we grill you further to ascertain whether or not you really do have the potential that your application package seems to show. So that's really how it works from our end, okay? So the workshop today is designed to tell you what is it that we're looking for? What is it that faculty in research universities are looking for in a research proposal? So I have a couple of slides that I'll share in a bit, but the first thing is you have to have a research question, something that is going to drive your research going forward. That doesn't mean, of course, that you can't change that research question once you join LUMS or any PhD program, right? Sometimes we think we're really interested in understanding the causal behavior of X over why. But when we come into these programs and are exposed to all kinds of very interesting work that is being done by scholars in different domains, we become interested in a totally different research question, and that is fine. But we do want you to be intellectually curious. And your research proposal shows us that intellectual curiosity and the potential to put that forward in a succinct, coherent proposal, all right? So let me share a slide. Oh, well, yeah, before I do that. So if you've seen the application form, one part of it is it's a series of questions that asks you about the research question, why you're interested in it, and something about the methodologies, right? So that form you fill out, but then I suggest that you also attach another page or 2 page or 3 pages, but really a couple of pages is more than what we want, of a coherent proposal. And I'll show you the components that we feel are important in any research proposal. And I will take your questions after we go through this. Let me share my screen. All right, so I hope that is visible. So this is the basic framework of any research design, whether it's a quantitative research design, a qualitative research design, whether it is for engineering or it is for management or anthropology or law, okay? What a research design essentially, so the middle part, the middle oval is the research question. So we usually begin with that research question. What is it that you're interested in exploring? You could be looking at, let me give you an example. So you could be looking at the question of whether, let's say, microfinance is able to put a dent in poverty in Pakistan. Does it really empower women? Or you could be looking at the 2010 floods in Pakistan and looking at what kind of institutional capacity could have prevented those floods, right? And the subsequent disaster management. So any area, any realm, any domain of interest would follow this sequence roughly, all right? So you first have to have a coherent research question. A research question is not, it's not idle curiosity. It is not a big kind of grand challenge, as we call it these days. It has to be, the term that I use for it is parsimony. Parsimony means have a question that is narrow. The focus is narrow enough that you can have a conceptual framework, methods that can help you solve or at least get an answer to this question, all right? So the broader your question, the harder it will be for you to fit a conceptual framework around it and to figure out the best methods to find the data to answer this question, right? So my advice to my PhD students always is find a question that is parsimonious. In other words, find a question that is narrow enough that you can provide answers to it with authority, all right? So you start with a research question. And where does the research question come from? It comes from some goals that you have. So maybe your goal is poverty alleviation, and you find that you want to look at microfinance to see whether or not it does anything to that. Maybe your goal is improved institutional and bureaucratic functioning. And what you're looking for, and you're using the floods, the 2010 floods, as a case study to look at improved institutional functioning, yeah? So that's your goal. And if in your proposal you talk about why that goal is important to you, in a line or two, not, don't give us a story, but in a line or two, tell us, why is this important to you? Why is there a personal side to it? So that just brings it closer to home for you, right? So that's goals. So the goals will determine your research questions. They will also determine the conceptual framework. Now, what's the conceptual framework? The conceptual framework is the theoretical model that you are going to use in order to analyze your research questions. How can you figure out what your theoretical model is? By looking at existing literature in the domain, in the field that you are grounding your research question in. Yeah. So again, using those two examples, if you're looking at microfinance, you will look at the experience of different countries with poverty alleviation in microfinance, and you will look at different poverty alleviation strategies. So you use these two broad literatures to frame your research question and your methods, all right? If you look at the floods, you will look at disaster management, you will look at the antecedents to these climate change events across different regions, or you could just limit yourself to Pakistan, and then maybe as comparative examples, you can look at institutional responses to climate change events in South Asia or some other region which you feel compares well with Pakistan, all right? And then once you have that conceptual framework, and for us to know that you have done some research, some secondary research, so in order to develop that framework, we would like to see your references. All right, so please do attach a bibliography at the end of your research proposal. It does not have to be extensive. About 5 references, 5 to 8 references are enough, but they have to look, first of all, solid. Are they from authentic sources, or are they from the Dawn newspaper, which is not a scholarly outlet, of course, right? It's a newspaper. And then we would like, not just for that reference list, we would like you to use that in the references that you're using in the proposal itself, so that we know that you have framed your question around the literature that exists. You have to show that you know some of the literature, at least some, right? And what is it that you feel the literature does not address that your research question will help, not just you, but the entire scholarly community? Because that's the purpose of research, right? We're trying to answer questions that have not been answered yet, or at least in a context where they have not been answered yet. Yeah, that's the whole purpose of a PhD. It is to extend existing knowledge, to extend our understanding of real world phenomena, right? At least at the social science level, and the business school uses that social science model. Okay, so now that we're done with the conceptual framing, the next part of your proposal should tell us a little bit about the methods that you choose. So very, very broadly speaking, there are quantitative methods and qualitative methods. Quantitative methods include surveys, experiments, randomized control trials, quasi-experiments, but they require a lot of data, all right? So if you can convince your reader that you have the capacity to collect humongous amounts of data, well, not humongous, but at least enough to run the quantitative software that is required, and that requires usually a sizable sample size, all right? So if you can just tell us, without going into too much detail, what kind of methods you think are most appropriate for the research questions that you wish to tackle. Yeah, you could also choose qualitative methods, and qualitative methods include semi-structured interviews, focus groups, ethnographic studies, content analysis, discourse analysis, right? So a whole host of methods on both sides, quantitative and qualitative. You could use, you could choose mixed methods. Mixed methods are usually more ambitious, but you know, they're fine. You would have to tell us the why you think a particular method is compelling for you. Why do you think that your research question is best answered by interviews, or is best answered by surveys, right? Or an ethnographic study is the best way to find answers to the questions that you framed. All right. The last part, and you don't need to spend a lot of time over it, but we do like to see a little bit on the validity. So what do you think are the concerns, and how have you addressed them related to the validity of your methods? Yeah. So if you say that I choose to go in and talk to people affected by the 2010 floods, and I plan to conduct focus groups with them, we'd like to understand how will that affect the quality of your data? Or you could say that, well, we want to conduct focus groups because access is difficult, and people may be resistant to giving answers to researchers, but in focus groups, they usually tend to speak more easily. And so here I am circumventing threats to validity by using focus groups. But then you also have to tell us, what is the limitation of that? The limitation of using a focus group is that your sample size isn't going to be as maybe large as running a large-scale survey. Yeah. So don't worry too much about knowing all of this. These are things that we will train you in. But if you can give us a little bit of an idea that you do know something about the goals, conceptual framing, the methods, validity of your research question, then that will really look like a solid research proposal. I'll give you a deeper look at this diagram in the next slide. So if you can look at this slide, it's really the same 5 ovals, but they tell you a little bit more about what could be some of the things that you talk about. So if you look at your goals, it could be because you see a perceived problem in the society around you that bothers you. It could fit with your personal goals. It could be with the concerns of the research participants themselves who have approached you and told you that we need to find solutions to these problems, and so help us. And then in your conceptual framework, you will be, again, you can use your personal experience, you can use, and you should use, in fact, you absolutely need to use some existing theory that and prior research done on in the domain that you are conducting your research in. All right. And these are more advanced exploratory research, pilot research, thought experiments. You don't need to go into it, but if you're interested, you can look it up. And then you look at methods, right? What is the research setting? As I said, if you choose to use focus groups, then maybe, in fact, definitely, your choice of methods is affected by your setting, right? Is this a question about your immediate surroundings? If it is, for instance, you're working in a large organization and you see an organizational problem that you feel requires attention. You go to your boss and say, I want to conduct research on this problem because I feel it's important for the success of our organization to study this problem. And your boss gives you this green signal. That suddenly gives you access to lots of data because you now have official access to data, right? So that will determine your methods. You will include document analysis. You will include interviews with the officers in the organization. You will also have to think about ethical standards. You may be biased because you're within the organization. You may want to make sure that your boss is not displeased with your findings and other ethical standards. My own research is on people living in extreme poverty. And so I have to deal with a lot of ethical issues. I have to convince my readers, my reviewers, and the journals that I write for that the methods that I use have carefully thought about the ethical issues that may arise with interviewing or conducting research with vulnerable participants, all right? And so, and then there's the research paradigm, which also affects your research question, right? What is the paradigm that you're using? Are you, and this can get into philosophical debate, so you don't have to worry too much about this at this level. All right, so the problems that you think may arise in this domain because of some preliminary data that you've already collected. But again, this is very much an advanced level. You need to really just worry about this. In your research proposal, if you can address all 5 of these points, the research question, the goals, conceptual framework, methods, and a little bit about validity, you're good to go. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And maybe we can look at the Q&A section. Okay, so none of the Q&A questions so far have anything to do with this research proposal. So please, if you have any questions related to writing the research proposal, please put it in the Q&A. I will only address those questions. The other questions you can ask to which book and website should we follow? Oh, okay, yeah. So I have no idea about these, right? I'm the faculty. I'm the PhD program director. I do not run the admissions office. So you will need to get in touch with the admissions office for questions like these. I have no idea. All right. And for the purpose of today, I am here to answer your questions and to give you ideas on how to write a good winning research proposal. So please, you're welcome to submit your questions in the Q&A. If you have any. And please remember that, yes, Madhusar, that's a great question. Please remember that we're not looking for a very long research proposal. A 2-pager, a 2.5-pager is actually the ideal, all right? As long as you answer the questions regarding your goals and conceptual framing, methods and validity around your research question, you'll be fine. And Madhusar's asking, do we need to read a lot of papers to come up with a question? No, you don't. As I said, about 5 to 8 references are fine. In fact, it could be 3 to 4, depending on what is it that you want to know. But when you think of doing a PhD, I'm sure that you are already intellectually curious. There's already some area that you're interested in pursuing, right? Where you have a personal or professional or some other question or goal that has bothered you or that you're curious about. And you don't need to know what your research question for your PhD will be. But in the past, for instance, one of our current PhD students who we took last year, we liked her proposal because last year was the first year of COVID, and she was applying for PhD finance, and she wanted to understand how capital markets would be reacting to the COVID situation and what would be the long-term impact of that on the companies behind those, the financial markets, right? So that was an interesting topical question. Let me see. All right. Yeah, so that's exactly what I gave you. I think it's Mrs. Hamza. There is an application form that asks you basic questions about the research that you're interested in following. And the format that I just gave you is it, right? So if you start with what the research question is of interest to you, why you're interested in it, and that's the goal, right? What is the conceptual framework that you intend to follow? And that means that in the conceptual framework, you will be citing the research that already exists in this area and the gap that you have identified, okay? And then the methods that you intend to use in order to get the findings from your data? How do you intend to get your data? And finally, if there are any threats to validity and how you intend to address those. Imad, of course, you said human resource management. Of course, I started this talk by saying that this is a PhD program, the one that I represent, in management. So HRM, or human resource management, is part of our first track, which is organizational behavior and strategy. Yeah. So any other question? Proposal samples, I guess, are available on Google. But the framework that I've given you through the slides, I think should be able to help you understand what that is. But I'm sure you can look up some on Google. Any other question? All right. At this point, there seem to be no other questions. Right, so if we don't get any other questions in the next 30 seconds, we can end this session. For those of you that are applying to the PhD management program at the business school, please do, the brochures are out soon. Our website also gives details. And so we encourage you to please look out for updates. We've put most of our information there already. The PhD program office contact details are already there on our website and in the soon to come brochures. You can email our PhD program office and you will get a quick reply to all of your queries. All right. Our officers are very, very concerned about making sure that your application process runs smooth and whatever questions you have for us are answered. So please contact them. And if there's anything, then they can get in touch with me as a program director, but usually they are able to answer all questions. Our admissions office is also there to answer your queries regarding the admissions process. Please know that we are looking for, even though we don't have a minimum GRE score, GMAT score anymore, we are looking for good scores. And if you want your application to be shortlisted, you should aim to get high scores so that we are able to shortlist your application, and that's when we would begin reading your research proposals. And yeah, one last thing that I'd like to say for the PhD program in management is that we welcome applications from a broad range of disciplines. So if you have a humanities discipline, engineering discipline, and of course a business discipline, policy discipline, we are interested in your applications because we are a multidisciplinary program. Yeah. So for instance, our operations research students often come with a engineering background. Now, of course, that's not required. I finance students are also from, it's not necessary that you have to have that background, but we are we are looking for people from nonprofit backgrounds, NGOs, from public sector, from private sector. But we're also, if you are a through and through academic, you're also welcome, very welcome to apply. Just know that it's a very rigorous program. It is going to require a lot out of you. I always tell people that a PhD is not for the faint of heart. It's not because you're going through a life crisis and you think, oh, I'm going to take my life in a different direction by going for a PhD. A PhD is a hard journey to take. So only move towards it if you're very convinced that this is what you want to do in the next stage of your life. All right. If you are in two minds, I would urge you to wait. It's not something that is going to be if you're only half-heartedly into it. All right. So anyway, good luck with your applications. Thank you very much. Yes. So Imad, your question is, how do we make Pakistani organizations understand the significance of HRM? Can it be a research question? Well, Pakistani organizations already have HR departments, right? So they may not take global best practices seriously, but that is too broad a research question. As I said in the beginning, we are looking at a question that is narrow enough. Right? So look at, if you're interested in HRM, then go through the HRM literature and see what aspects of it are important to you. Yeah. So you could look at something about, I don't know, you could look at recruitment policies in Pakistani organizations and what the HRM literature can tell us about improving recruitment policies. What is it that Pakistani organizations in particular need to learn from the global best practices when it comes to recruitment, right? So HRM is a huge field. One of our top faculty, Dr. Jawad Sayed, has written textbooks, internationally used textbooks, textbooks on HRM that is used internationally. All right, it's now running, I think, in its second edition. So we have people that may be reviewing your applications that are experts in the fields that you are interested in. So you have to show to us that you know something, or at least you've done some reading in the research area that you're proposing to do your work in. That doesn't mean that you need to sound like any kind of an expert, right? No, that's absolutely not needed, but you do need to have looked at some of the literature. Yeah. All right, so yeah, I don't think there are any other research questions related to the research workshop or the research proposal, right? So I can, I think, end this session. Thank you very much for joining us.